It says it's being sent to
Oh,
custom.
it does.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I think we're going. I apologize for that. I had a little technical error. So I do believe we are live. If we're not, we're recording. Um, okay, so what you don't know about developing a luxury RV resort. Welcome to Talk About TV. I'm your host, Michelle Oliver, and I'm so excited to be here today with Joey Locker. Joey, I think you have the secret, right? I hope you do, to what it takes to develop a high-end luxury RV resort. I mean, people are trying to do it, people fail, they get to a certain point, they invest their life savings.
Oh yeah.
I've heard all kinds of variations on this theme. So, welcome and thank you for being here today.
Yeah, of course. I really appreciate having me.
Would you please take just 2 minutes and tell everyone who you are? Just introduce yourself briefly, and then we'll just get into this conversation.
Yeah, my name is Joey Locker. I am a developer out of Nashville, Tennessee. I am developing a 72-acre property that sits on about a half a mile riverfront that we are about an hour and a half boat ride to downtown Nashville and about a 25-minute drive to downtown Nashville. We will have 272 lots, an 8,500 square foot main clubhouse, a 2,500 square foot private clubhouse for owners, a 3,000 square foot restaurant, 12 cabins, and an outdoor amphitheater on the property. So we going through permitting as we speak, and it's definitely been an interesting ride, that's for sure.
And you're still smiling.
Oh yeah.
Going through permitting. A lot of people are crying when they're going through permitting. So,
Oh, there's
but
been
but
plenty
I've
of times that
yeah.
I've wanted to cry through some of this just because it's with a project like this, I went through I shot big. So I'm dealing with local authorities, the state and federal all at the same time with a project. So it's you
Okay.
getting things thrown at you from every direction.
You do. So, how about we just start with your vision? Like, what was your vision to begin with? How did
So
this come about?
yeah.
Where's the motivate? Why? The
So
ultimate existential question. Why are
So
you doing
it, I've got a strange story, my backstory and everything of how this kind of came about. But in 2020, where we were all sitting at home and everything through COVID, I met my now girlfriend, and I was introduced to her parents, and her parents live just outside Bloomington, Indiana. And they've got a little campground that they rent a spot in year round um, up there on the lake on Lake Mormon, Morton. I'm forgetting the name, but the their little spot, it maybe be 15 acres at most, but they have their little spot and there's maybe 30 or 40 lots inside of there. But it's their lake life without the lake life cost. And they have their campers there, they have their boats there, they got little decks, and it's a huge community, but it didn't cost you a couple $1 million to buy a lake house. It was right there. You could go drop your boat in right down at the marina. So I loved it. I was like, man, this is incredible. Like this, like I want to look for one of these when we get back to Nashville and possibly
Yeah.
buy a camper and move one in there and all that. And when I got back to Nashville and we were started looking and researching on it, there wasn't really anything like that around Nashville. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. So what are our options? And you didn't really have that long term. You had your short term stuff. The long term ones were more. They weren't really near anything as far as amenity wise. So I was like, man, this would be good to like buy 5 acres and put a couple RVs out there and go put boats out there, and we would go ahead and have our lake life. And while we weren't there, we could possibly rent out those the RVs and stuff, so it could possibly cash flow as well. So started looking into it further, and I just so happened had found some property up by a nearby lake and started looking into it. But again, my girlfriend introduced me to one of her friends, and we were over there at her house, and her parents were in town. And we were kind of talking about the RV business and stuff like that, of what we were kind of talking about. And they're like, "Yeah, well, we own a couple RV lots." And I was like, "What do you mean you own the RV lots?" They're like, "Yeah, we own some lots in Las Vegas Motorcoach Resort, and like they're deeded
Oh,
lots." And I
okay.
was like, I "This makes no sense. What are you talking about? Like I've heard you like renting a spot long term, but you're actually buying an RV lot and that." And they're like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Okay." I looked into it, and I looked at Las Vegas Motorcoach Resort. It's 406 lots. It sits on about 40 acres, 5 minutes from the Vegas Strip. But lots in there were going from like for 130,000 to like 1.3 million. And I was
I
like,
know it's
"Whoa." I'm like, "This
it's a
doesn't
whole
make."
new world.
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
just like, this doesn't make sense. Like this is like I did like what is on this RV lot?" And some of them are just a little grill and a little sitting area, but it's a place for them to park their RV. And then the HOAs are like $500 a month. I was like,
Yeah.
this is mind-boggling. So I kind of like took a bigger picture look at it, and I was like, man, like, well, where are the rest of these at? Like, where do these exist? So you would look into them and saw some in California, and then you saw some in Colorado, and then you saw Michigan and the Carolinas, and then Florida's probably got like 90% of them. And I was like, well, what do we have here in Nashville? What's the like, where's the closest thing to Nashville when it came to luxury? And we had zero in the state that were kind of categorized.
Wow.
And
Okay.
I was just like, why? Like I can't like
Why?
what's going on? So I just you just keep researching. So by the summer of 2021, I was touring an RV park here locally, and I watched a 45-foot Prevo get stuck, and I was like, man,
Oh, wow.
that's the nicest resort we have here in Nashville. Like that's the pinnacle. And that guy who has the nicest bus is stuck. So I started you start paying attention. So
Yes.
you're in like a Kroger parking lot or a Publix parking lot or Walmart's. You start seeing these buses all sitting in the back of the parking lot overnight. So I kind of got the courage and just went knocked on their door. I was like, "Hey, why are y'all staying here? Why like what is the choice of staying here?" They're like, "There's nowhere nice to stay here in Nashville. I mean, we can go stay at some of these other RV parks, but there's nothing to really do there, so we can come stay here for free." And I was like, "Okay." Um, finally,
Wow,
uh,
Joey.
finally, I was just like, "Man, like this needs to happen." I'm like,
Yeah.
it seemed that I just got to it first. Like I just because like this was coming. This is like Nashville, the the
Yeah.
city itself. We're in this hub of a corridor for transportation to go north, west, south, and east. I think Tennessee is you can get to like 80% of the US from Tennessee in like 8 hours. So like you can get almost anywhere. So people go through Tennessee to go south, north. I mean, you go through here. So I was like, man, this is coming. So I finally, I was still doing research, and I was like, well, how do you like it's weird to say, but like I Googled how do you build an RV resort? Like I literally that's my search, and I started going through the sheets, and probably on like the second page I come across a group in Colorado, outdoor design group, a guy named Matt Corin.
Oh, I love Matt.
Matt,
I
great.
have a call with him on Friday. He's great.
Yeah,
I don't
he's the
know if I knew
mastermind
that.
behind this. Well, the
Did
creator.
I know that? I don't know if I knew that, but he's fabulous. So that's awesome. He's right down the road from me. That's so
Oh yeah,
cool.
so I
Yeah.
found him online, and then I had just so happened been taking a trip out to Colorado for work and a ski trip. So it was like, oh man, I'm flying in. Let me come by and introduce myself and show you my idea and everything I'm doing. And Matt was like, man, I can give you almost everything you need to be able to get this done. So that came with a concept design and kind of a master plan from it. And then he came with a side that could help put together your CapEx and your projections and all that to be able to take it to a bank or investors and stuff like that. So I was like, I finally in February of 22, I was like, all right, this will work. I can do it. I can do it. I found some properties that this would potentially work with. And instead of taking the route of, man, I've got a great idea. I like this will work. I'm going to buy that property and do it. I was worried that this was so big that it needed the support of a local community. I couldn't just go in and find a piece of property and build what I wanted. I needed to get the backing of people as well. Because this would cause a lot of traffic. This was going to change the scope of a community with what we're doing. So I went around and just started asking the economic directors, the Chamber of Commerce's and stuff of like, hey, I've got this idea. Um, would you want it? Like, is this something that the community would support? And you had multiple counties that were no, with some of them laugh you out the door because they're selling single family homes in the millions. Like, that's not us. Even when I was trying to explain what kind of customer base we were going after. And then the community that I'm in Cheatham County, small community, maybe 42,000 people in the entire county, very small quaint place that's right outside of downtown bustling Nashville and growth, but they had really kept it pristine out there, very country, very rolling hills, and you don't really see the high rises haven't made it out there or anything like that. So um, showed them the project, showed them what I wanted to do, got their support. I got the leadership support, and then it came to the community itself, which that took some convincing. And that kind of goes into what the conversation's about. Is like what you don't know is like when you're going for something like this, like you don't realize that like you've really got to be the face of the project. And that goes along why I put my last name on there because many people ask like why are you naming it with your last name on it? And a lot of that came down to um, I wanted people to know that if it failed, there was only one person to blame. There was no other person behind this that could be blamed. But if it worked, I could celebrate an entire team that helped me bring it together and whatnot. So it wasn't easy, but things you didn't know were like you needed to be that person and that would step up in front of the community and attack or not again not attack I guess respond to their concerns. So I started putting town halls on. I during the zoning process I stood in front of the um, courthouse for like 30 minutes early sometimes to be able to like, hey, if you're willing to come talk to me, come talk to me. I'm willing to talk to you guys about this process. So 6 months of going back and forth where the first meeting there had to be 150 people in that room. We were there for hours. And I was terrified after that first meeting. I was like, man, there's a lot of people here who don't like this. And then what you didn't know there is you got to think in someone else's perspective, where their mind is at, how they look at this project. Because in the beginning, I was looking at where I was looking at it, and with the community, they saw things that didn't fit with their vision of the community. And a lot of that was just misconceptions because, like me and you just talked about how that RV lots are going from 130,000 to 1.3 million is just mind-boggling. That's still mind-boggling to them. No one understood that. So the
Yeah.
the thought behind this, they didn't understand what we were doing. So instead of thinking we were doing luxury, it got tied to just an everyday campground or a trailer park.
A
The
trailer
I
park.
got told,
Yeah,
I got
that's
so
still
many
a
people on
mentality.
I mean, people on Facebook and stuff like that were like, "Oh, he's building a trailer park." I'm like, "Oh, wait, y'all don't know what we're building." So it was all right. Get renderings together, get really show that. Get out there in front of everybody. Like, hey, that's not what we're doing. And one of the things that I realized early on is that yes, the community, you need to direct those concerns and all that, but when it came to who the community was feeding their questions or concerns to was that board. So I had to go and try to sit in front of everyone on that board to show them like, hey, I know that these are the list of things that people are saying, but this is not what we're doing. This is what we're doing. So if you do get someone come to you and say something off the wall, know that that's not true. And there's a Facebook group that man, they roasted me all the way through it. But I was able to write down all their concerns. Like, hey, this is what you were concerned about. Hey, this is what you're concerned about, and address each concern with it and what we were doing and not doing. So, time we got to the end of the approval, it had a zero person there with opposition. Yeah.
I'm
So,
blown away by that.
but that's now that was February of 22, and that the full approval from the community level just came. So, I mean, you're over 2.5 years
Wow,
with that of going back and
crazy.
forth with stuff. So, it's definitely I'm an optimistic person. Like I
Yeah,
like to look I don't like I like to look at life optimistically because it's what keeps me going. Because if I would have kind of listened to everyone in the beginning, I wouldn't be at this position I'm at because there was a lot of like, I don't know if you can do that. I don't know if you can do that. Now you're not going to be able to do that, but it's possible. You just have to keep taking steps towards it. And it's been fun, and that's where you were saying earlier, like, oh, you're smiling about it because this is the
yeah,
biggest challenge I've ever been in my entire life, and it may be the biggest I ever faced, but it's a learning experience, and I think that's what you try to get out of anything you're doing with it. So I want to succeed. So have fun while I'm doing it because if I'm miserable during this entire time, like, what was it for? Like, I'm not worried about
right,
the money part at the end of this. This is more of something because this isn't the only one I want to do. I want to do 6 or 7 more of these because
right.
America does not have enough. I mean, there's literally, I
Yeah,
think, 42 that are considered in this category of in the luxury space, but even in those 42, there's maybe 10 that are really in the category of what we would really like to be in to be able to compete in that luxury market that's out there.
yeah. Wow. I do really understand what you're talking about with I had a business that I went through that with, the town meetings, and I just kept thinking, I'll just do another one. I'll just do another one and I'll go meet all the people and that's what I spent, I don't know, 9 months doing, is building relationships, communicating, and having, you got to turn your enemies. I had people like keying my car and having
Oh man.
threats and all that kind of crazy shit, the Facebook group. And and at that point, you kind of feel like you're in a, um, you know, I don't know, good guy bad guy movie, and you got to turn all those people into your friends,
Yeah,
and the
I
way you do that
100%.
is exactly what you said. Like, you have to see their perspective. They feel threatened or they misunderstand, and but the more you build, I love that you did it this way, just
Yeah.
intuitively, because then the community is like behind you,
Yeah.
and you're never going to have those problems. And the fact that you named the resort your name, you're willing to be out there, you're totally transparent, you're not like hiding.
Yeah.
A lot of these projects, I think communities wonder, they said about me, you're some rich girl from New York, and I'm
Oh
like,
yeah.
what?
I was a
No.
rich kid from California, and I was like, I grew up an hour
Yeah,
from here. What are you talking about?
right. Exactly. I'm like, no, I'm a single mom with a business in Colorado, like
Yeah.
working all the time. Yeah, they just create these scenarios. So it's
Oh
really
yeah, there's some
exciting when it comes to life. Yeah.
craziest things that people just made up. And I'll tell like a good story because I love telling this. So there was a gentleman that came to the meeting one night, and before that meeting, where I said I stood out front, well, he took me up on that. He came in, he was like, "Hey, we believe this is going to be great for our community. This we support this. Yes, this is going to be great." I was like, "Awesome." I was like, "Say that inside. Like, I'd love to have some more people on my side, so it's not just
Yes.
negative. So
Stand
that
up and
because that's the
announce that.
crazy part is like you've got so many people negative, you've got to convince some people that
That's
are on
right.
your side to also come and say something positive about it. So
Yeah.
in that meeting, it was going back and forth, and we'd had probably like two negative people in a row with it, and then he comes up, and I was like, "Oh, awesome! This guy's got something positive to say."
Yeah.
Oh man! So he he
Oh
gets up there
no.
and he goes, "Board, you guys know what Mr. Locker's development is proposing. He goes, is proposing boat docks and boat ramps. We at one point had boat ramps on there. Those are off now, but he
Mhm.
goes, do you know who uses boat docks and boat ramps? He goes, the cartel. The cartel is going to come
Oh
in our
my
community,
God.
make our drug problem way worse, and then at the end of it, they're going to take that resort from him, and then we've got the cartel living in our community. Like
Oh my
just
God.
jaw drop. Like I'm looking at
Like
my girlfriend,
Netflix.
looking at my girlfriend. I was like, "Is that?" She was like, "Isn't that the guy that was just outside with us? Like, what just happened?" And like he looks at me as he walks by and like thumbs up and goes sit down. I was like, "What just happened? Like this doesn't make any sense." Like it
My God. That is hilarious.
Oh
That's
man.
how people, yeah, I totally get it. That's so funny.
So
Well, you,
we've got a historical spot on the property that dates back like 7,000 plus years. So, and it's a shell midden that the Indian culture in that time was instead of farmers, they were fishermen. So they would take mussels and rock snails and different kind of shell life out of the river, and that would be their food, and then they would pile up their shells. So we've got about I don't know, a little over half an acre or so of a shell midden from where they were in one spot, just doing that for centuries. So it's a half an acre, about 7 foot deep in some spots. Well, the rumor is that it's burial ground, but with that spot, no one's actually been able to survey it because it's always been on private property. So they know something's there because people have looted in the past and they've turned up some artifacts and stuff from it. So I thought that'd
okay,
be a great part of our story. Protect that, tell the history of the land and all that.
right.
Well, people knew about that in the community, the people that kind of knew about the spot, and it was he's going to bulldoze all those that property is filled with thousands of bodies of burials. He's going to he's going to push all those dead
Oh
bodies
no.
into the river when he starts. And I was like, oh my goodness, like it's like people would just say anything without any research, and but it
The imagination. Oh my goodness.
dude,
But
it was it went
you
everywhere.
overcame all this. You overcame all of it
Yeah, I mean
because
it's
look where you are now. Yeah. And I guess they just, I don't know. They are having a disruption of
yeah,
what they know to be true, right?
one of the big things in Tennessee right now is like you've got a lot of outsiders moving in, California, New
Okay.
York, and stuff like that. I have no problem with that. I love the growth that we're seeing in this area.
Yeah,
Good
yeah.
and bad that come with it, but I'm a component of growth. And so you've got a couple people out there that are uh, that moved here, moved to the small community stuff because this is a small, quaint little community. Where we're going and putting this resort is a growing area. It's been put in the community growth area, so everything's coming. So
Right, right. That's great.
we're one of like the first major projects in this. So some of the people in there just don't like growth. And
Mhm.
so last year, around Thanksgiving time, we do a Friendsgiving. So I was like, man, it'd be great just to do Friendsgiving out at the property. We could take our side by sides out there. We can shoot guns and all this, and just all eat and hang out around the fire. So we
Yeah.
set everything up, and we're out there riding around, and we're out there, everybody shooting guns and whatnot, and all of a sudden, a cop comes down the property,
Uh-oh.
like drives all the way back to the river, and which is it's a quarter-mile drive back to the river where we're at. So he drives back there, and I see him coming, and I was like, man, it's really random that a cop is just randomly driving on our property. So walked over, and I knew who he was. I made sure I introduced myself to all the police officers and sheriffs in the community, and I saw him like, man, what are you doing here? He was like, well, one of your local Californians called and said they heard gunshots over here and they were scared that someone was being murdered. And he goes, I had to, he goes,
Oh
I
my
had to remind them that today was the opening day of gun season and that they would probably be hearing gunshots in the country. So he
Oh
just
my
laughed it off. I
gosh.
was like, "Man, do you want to play?" I'm like, "We're not killing anybody. We're just shooting." And he was like, "Man," he goes, "This is you've got a right to do whatever you want out here." He goes, "This is your land." He goes, "I just wanted to come out here to make everybody feel a little bit better about us. I mean, you want to plate
Yeah,
anything?" He goes, "No, I'll go handle the Californians real quick, and we'll be good. Y'all have a good time."
that's awesome. It's just communication, right? And
Oh man, it's
yeah,
definitely communication.
patience.
Patient, yeah, that's something I've learned. That's something I didn't know I needed to know is how to be patient with things because things are not quick, and you can think you're prepared for anything, and you could be prepared for anything, but it's there's still something going to pop up. I mean, it's we've had to do like three major things have come up about our project that were just like, what? That's a thing? One is we've got there's a TWRA, which is our Tennessee Wildlife area. It's about I think it's like
Oh, yeah.
2,500 acres, and it's a couple miles from us. But that's all state protected land and all that, and federally protected. So we were having a meeting with the Army Corps, and one of the guys from the TWRA came on, and he goes, how, where are you guys located at? And I was like, yeah, this is where we're at and everything. He goes, okay, that's not too far from our land out there. He goes, um, so you're going to need to get a bat survey. I'm like,
He-
what?
Oh my God, here we go. Yeah.
What? He goes, yeah, there are some endangered bats in the area, and he listed those off, and I was like, okay. I was like, what's a bat
You
survey?
think they're joking, right?
Man,
But they
and
live their
like,
lives for this.
dude, and the if you Google bat survey, it's not easy just to find out who does bat surveys and stuff like that. So luckily, I called that guy
Batman.
who brought it up. I was like, hey, you mentioned we needed a
Yeah.
bat survey. I was like, who does that? And luckily, he gave me a list of people, and I called them, and they got it. And that process was just crazy how they did it, but very expensive. And then on that same call, they also mentioned that, hey, you may have some endangered mussels in that area. I was like, we're the river's still producing mussels? And they're like, yeah, we have some freshwater mussels in there, but they're endangered because of us putting the Army Corps putting in the dams. I was like, so you
Oh,
guys decimated the
jeez.
population and now turned them into that.
Now
And
it's
then
your
we've got to pay for it.
responsibility.
Yeah.
That's right. Oh,
No,
goodness.
we sit on a half a mile riverfront, so you've got 3,400 lineal foot of
Yeah.
he had to go in 5 foot sections. And this guy was out there for 3 days in scuba deer, going back and forth, doing transects
Oh,
on there. Like it was just nuts. And then nothing came out of that. Nothing came out of the bat stuff. And then the other day, last 2 weeks ago, we you go once you put out your public notice for the Army Corps, the public can come back and comment. And one of the comments came back um, that there may be a salamander in our area that we need to go check for. So, and that salamander can only be checked for during certain times of the year. So, luckily, it's January to May. So, first week of January, that guy's coming out there, and it's only a small section that is being looked at for that. But I was like, well, what does that entail? Well, you get this guy from the state to come out, and you guys walk that creek bed or the stream bed
Yeah.
that you're potentially impacting, and you kick over rocks. And I was like, okay, what if we find
And
one?
what does that cost
Yeah, I
me
was like,
again,
well, what is
right?
this
What if
one?
we
It's
find it?
I think it's just it's a cheap the state has a representative that comes out and
Oh,
they,
awesome.
but I've got a consultant that's with me, so I'll pay that. But
Right, right.
I was like, well, what happens if you do find a salamander? And he was like, well, you just can't do construction in that area during their like breeding time. So from January to May, you can't do any construction. So after that, you can go in and do all the construction you need for it. I was like, okay. So just another thing. I was like, is there any more endangered anything in our area, guys? Like, what is going on? How many more things are on your list? And apparently, the salamander, they're finding it everywhere. So to say it's endangered doesn't really make a lot of sense.
Oh my goodness. So, well, let's talk about the money because
Yep.
as you're describing this, we've worked with numbers of people that they you can have what you think is all of your ducks in a row, and then this is what happens, one thing after another, and it can be 10 more pages of stuff like this, right?
Yeah.
Depending on where you are. And it sounds like you're in a pretty easy place, really. Like, I mean, I don't know if that's true, but compared
Wouldn't
to
say
maybe
easy. It's
California,
Yeah, I
oh,
would say easy just because the so state and community, state and local, I would say Tennessee is very pro growth and pro going towards
okay.
that. But once you get in with the Army Corps, they're
Oh my
federal. They
gosh.
have their own rules. They don't care about your
Right.
state, local. They don't. And what I'm learning through that is they're very black and white. And
Mhm.
one of the things that was mentioned in the last meeting that we had, it was mentioned multiple times that by allowing you to do what you're doing, they're looking for not to be sued if they allow you to do it. So apparently, there's
Exactly.
all these environmental groups that are out here, environmental lawyers that are just constantly trying to sue the federal government over them allowing people to do certain things. So
Mm,
they want you to be able to, if they allow you, you need to have every piece of paper that you could ever imagine, every piece of calculation, every little thing that if someone does try to sue them, that the Army Corps can give them this packet and say, no, this is what we did and this is the reason why, go through it.
yeah.
So that
Can you
350,
explain to people who don't understand the Army Corps and what your relationship is, like why you're even having to deal with them?
oh yeah. So which is that's
Because,
I learned a lot through that because in the state of Tennessee, you have, well, actually federally. So any piece of body of water that is used for commercial use. So like your oceans and stuff like that, you're around your um, like your marinas and stuff like that are on lakes. Those are kind of, it depends on that lake and if it's fed by a national river, but they are working with them since we are on the Cumberland River. And the Cumberland River, you can take it from downtown Nashville, you can take a boat to the Gulf of Mexico and go all to New Orleans. So that is a federally protected shipping channel. So any of your property that is connected to that, if you want to, they've got basically like a couple feet in of land that they owned along that river. So for you to impact that, so for us to come in and rip wrap that entire front of the property itself, I need to have a permit from that. Then, since we have wetlands on the property and there are streams that run from those wetlands to that body of water, they have jurisdiction over it as well. So with the Army Corps, they have jurisdiction, and a lot of things have been changing over the last couple of years because there's been some stuff in the Supreme Court that's changing things as far as the authority that the Army Corps has, but with that, I basically was like, okay, I know there's some things going on, but like keep me to this high standard. Like let's keep stay there so we can keep going anyways. So with them, if there's anything that they have jurisdiction on, you've got to go through a permit process that basically gives their permission to impact their property. So riprapping that front of the property is supported, but what's the reasoning behind it? Because we would rather, the Army Corps would rather keep it natural. They don't want you to do anything to this land. And
Right,
so
right.
for you to do it, you've got to get their permission. And the federal government, man, they're a beast.
That's a whole nother group of people.
And there's 12 or
You're
13
dealing with
different
it.
departments underneath that you're working with
Oh
within the
my
Army
gosh,
Corps.
it's crazy.
And
It's
they
crazy.
don't talk. So they just send things to the top, and then the top disseminates it down to other people. Then one group will take
Oh my
a week to
goodness.
respond to you. The next group will take a month to respond to you. And like,
Right.
because they've got 90 days or something like that to be able to respond. And that is another relationship thing, I believe. That's why I've really
Yes. You're
our
good at that. You're
project
good at
manager that's on that. I'm talking to like, hey, this is what I'm
yes.
thinking. Do you support it? Do you not support it? What's wrong with it? And they're black and white. They don't want to lead you down the path that you need to, because that's them helping they're supposed to be protecting the land and all that, not really helping
Right.
developers, I guess. But
Right, right. Not helping developers. So, Joey, this is a marathon.
it's an ultra
This is
marathon
this
when it
is an
comes to
ultra
this.
marathon. This is why so many people that we've worked with through Evolve, like before all the lodging and we were just consulting, so many people don't make it. They
I
don't
mean,
make it. And they'll keep going and going, and then something will happen where they're just like, I'm walking away.
no.
So, what have you got to say about that?
So I feel like I've hit that times multiple times through this, because I mean, the naiveness in me in the beginning was, hey, I know this is going to take a little bit, but the 2.5, 3 year thing was not accounted for. So, and thinking that it was going to take this, because you keep getting people saying from these different agencies, like, yeah, this is how long I think you're out. And not even close. Like, just because
No.
there's more and more things that kind of come up through it. So there was no way to really pre-plan for it, except for in my case, and I think this is what's kind of saved me in all of it, is this is a big project. So um the money that can be made on the higher end of this is worth going through these initial stages and stuff. So when I set out to do this, if I was setting out to do just a regular campground that was cash flowing, that you really didn't really start paying off your debt until the place opened and stuff like that, like, you I think you're limited on your budget and whatnot. You really got to pinch those numbers. You really got to stuff. Everything's like, okay, I've got to this occupancy level by this time. And with what we're doing, I was able to have proof of concept and show that people were interested in this and whatnot, that this was something that was viable in it. And showing that, I believe, showed my investors with it that, hey, okay, he is doing this. He's doing what he says that he's doing. And that's one of I think my biggest traits is I am transparent to a fault. Like, I will give you every piece of information you want, because I don't want you thinking that I'm hiding anything. I'm collective in when I'm sending information of bad news, because I'm a I'm a fan of the like the 1-3-1 rule, where it's basically you got one problem, you got three options,
Oh,
how to
yeah.
fix it, and then you got the one suggested thing to do it. So
Yeah, yeah.
I did that with my approach with everything. I saw a problem. I figured out what my options were from that problem, and then I gave my suggestion on what we should do. That my suggestion wasn't the route that was taken every time, but it showed people what that I felt we should do in the direction we could do. And then that's when my partners were able to kind of look at it and kind of walk me through certain different stages. And same thing with the private equity group we're in, like being very transparent with them, like, hey, we are having issues. We are seeing some delays here on stuff, but here's the upside of this when this does go through. And with and I've been able to show that we have support. So having the local support and showing those permitting stuff like that, and then showing that we've got things with the state almost handled as well. So those steps show people that this is viable. It's and even with the Army Corps, they come out and even said that they were like, if we didn't like this rule, we'd tell you with this idea, we'd tell you. We wouldn't waste your time for you to go through all this stuff. We let you know. We just don't agree with the way that you've approached this yet. So work on X, Y, and Z, and then come back to us on there. And that goes into some depths of how the Army Corps looks at things from like a purpose and need spot in there, that where the black and white stuff comes. Like it's how you word certain things to be able to get the things you need out of them. Because again, they're trying not to get sued. So like, what
Yeah,
you do?
man, all these people are so fortunate that this is you doing this.
Yeah,
Because
I
your passion and your commitment, like to helping everyone, there's no we're doing it our way or I'm fighting you. It's like, oh no, we really are legitimately working together. And I think that just that energy that you carry, and it's so obvious that you
mean,
really are open to collaborating with everyone. And that is the key to overall success, truly, because you'll get there and then you'll do the same thing with your team and the same thing with your guests. I mean, that's hospitality, right?
that's
Just
100%.
communicating with people. Yeah, I
You got
really
to.
love that.
You people got to know where your intentions are. You mentioned something earlier, especially about like where the money was coming from and stuff like that, where
Yeah.
some people are worried about that. I actually, one of the commissioners at the time sat me down. I asked him, I was like, hey, I'd love to be able to talk about my project that I'd like to be able to bring to the community. I'd like to sit down with you personally and answer any questions that you may have about this that we're going through. He was like, yeah. So we set it up and we're going through the process of kind of everything. And at the end of that conversation, he was just like, oh, so what I do for work on his day job, because I didn't ask that question at first, and I'm like, hey, I'm in my mind, I was like, oh, you're a commissioner, that's what you do, but no, he's got a life outside of being a leader in the community, and he was like, well, I work for the TBI, the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, and I was just like, so you know everything about me already, you looked me up. But one of his things
That's
was,
so amazing.
he goes, "Where's your money coming from?" He goes, "One of the things we worry about in our community is that we don't want foreign investors. We don't want money coming from overseas that is being pumped in our community and stuff like that." Without prior knowledge, we want to know who's investing in our communities. And I was like, no, I was like, I'm American. I laid out everybody who it is. I was like, you can call them if you want to. I mean, or you can look them up in your in the TBI stuff. So,
Right.
but it's
Check it out.
knowing where that was coming from was big on that on the money side. And
Interesting.
we
Interesting.
originally this plan was
You could
originally,
never anticipate that. You
oh
could
no,
never anticipate pretty much 95% of everything you've described.
it's learning.
Right.
You've got to learn to kind of not go into something with thinking you know the answers to it. It's
Mm.
more of, okay, where do I pivot when I get answers that don't go with what I'm doing? How do I pivot to still catch the dream and but need to pivot to make other people happy within this so that they're supportive in it. So I pivoted a lot on the way to
Yeah.
through this, but it made everyone feel like we're being collaborative. I mean, they had
Right.
say so
I
in what
love
we were
that.
doing, and this is their community as well. So if you're going to allow the
Yeah.
business to come in and say they're going to do things, I understand the point of keeping someone to their word or keeping this community safe. So, I mean, there are plenty of things that we could have argued and probably won in the end, but taking the route of I know the best and I think can slow you down as well. I think that's where some people have failed, where they're like, no, it's this way. We have to do it this way without being able to pivot on it. And then if
I
you get
can't
to a
tell you
point they
how,
stop you,
yeah,
then the money runs out. So
I can't tell you how many people we've spoken with who are like that. They're just so convinced that their way is the way.
I mean, you have to have
And
some you have to have some confidence in what your idea will work,
sure,
but to get down to every little specific detail of it isn't
yeah,
necessarily needed because those details are going to change, and you got to be willing to
that's
change
right.
some of those details that are in there. Keep the
Yes,
dream alive,
you're
but
right.
inner workings of it doesn't necessarily have to be what you started with because what we started with is not what we have here because we were kicked in the teeth with multiple things on this property that we had no clue. There's no way to know some of these things until you actually took that leap to kind
Yeah.
of get into it because you were going to sink money into it to be able to get something of this magnitude.
Yeah, one step at a time. And ultimately, it is a privilege to go
Oh,
into a community and create what you want. So I love that you said that it's their community as well. Very few people really think that way. And
yeah.
yet you need the community, right?
Yeah.
So I have well, two questions for you. One question, and then well, actually two questions. Okay, so in future, these future developments, would you do it the same way with a greenfield development, or would you look at something that's already existing, or have you even thought about that? Like,
So I like the new development side because then you can get creative in it.
yeah,
And one of the things I worry about some of these other existing parks and whatnot, a majority of these parks are old. I mean, they would need some upgrades. Yeah, you could probably get it at a cheaper route, a cheaper cost, but to upgrade those and then kind of build what you're kind of wanting into this, you're limited to what the design you have already. I like
mm,
and within the luxury space, I mean, a majority of your luxury resorts that are out there were built in the like early 2000s. I mean, that you haven't had a whole lot of new resorts that have really taken
true.
off. I mean, you've got Mountain Falls that have added new sections to theirs, and then you got Hearthside up in Michigan that are expanding, and some of these other ones. But a lot of these older ones, their HOAs are so high because of these are aging resorts. So seeing some resorts that are $700-800 a month for an HOA is just,
Yeah.
oh man, how do we building new? I can build long-term infrastructure that once the HOA takes over in ours, they know they've got a project that with every component that we installed has a life expectancy on it. And then
That's crazy,
yeah,
Joey. I mean, 'cause that is actually a huge point. The way the build can happen now, and because of what you're doing and you're building with all of your amazing materials, like things have come a long, long way
yeah.
in a really short amount of that. That's a huge asset.
So being able to
Yeah.
do that and then
Do,
calculate that because if a product has a lifespan and this is a long-term community, you need those capital money to do some of those infrastructure costs that as they go. So where you see some projects even fail after they're open is because they didn't plan for some of these things long term. So
right.
really staying on top of maintenance and thinking like, okay, in 30 years, we're going to need to replace this, this, and this. So how much
Mhm.
money do we need to put aside for that cost plus inflation and whatever it may cost in the future? Like, how do we pre-plan for that so that we're prepared and that you can keep those HOA costs down over time instead of constantly kind of inching them up?
Right. So maybe, excuse me, we should end on the note of, do you want to share a little bit about your building materials?
Yeah, so we went really
That's a pretty
in,
big, cool thing.
so a lot of the infrastructure stuff is like what we're going through now, figuring out what we're wanting to use. Everything's going to be underground burials of our utilities and stuff, but being able to have those in places that if they need to be fixed or adjusted or anything like that, they're easily to get to, and it's not going to cost an arm and a leg to kind of fix those. But when it comes to like the build materials and stuff, it was a kind of you have that luxury feel to it, but without that, it's like some of the, I don't know, you can get crazy with some of your materials and importing stuff from overseas. And I'm a big fan of
Yeah,
like, just the local builders and the local things that you can get from people. So our pavilions that we're going to have on the project are all done by a local company, Homestead Timber Frames. They will bring in the raw wood, they will hand cut them and put them together in their shop and then disassemble them and bring them out on property and then build them for the customer as well. So those are all Douglas fir, just gorgeous, gorgeous pavilions. And then we're going to do a barn dominium theme across the resort with everything. So we've worked with a fantastic designer out of Texas, the barn dominium company, Stacy Lynn. I mean, she's designing different barn dominiums for celebrities all the time. She's got a bunch of them around here in Nashville, but that theme across the entire resort with that metal roof and that
beautiful.
beautiful
Yeah,
wood accents, and
yeah,
then
I love
your
it.
Tennessee limestone throughout the place as well. Going with that more, I don't know, like a local country feel that we're not doing a lot of importing from overseas and stuff like that. So,
Yeah,
and then
so
with
good.
the individual lots, I mean, it's gonna be up to owners as well. Like we have some things that we suggest, and but we want owners to also feel that they can be creative if they want to. I mean, we don't want to see pink roofs, but within reason, in that luxury space, we want people to
Yeah,
be creative because if these are lots that owners will be able to rent out and to be able to rent it out effectively, what makes your lots the most approachable? I want to rent that lot because they have X, Y, and Z. When this lot, oh yeah, it's $5 cheaper a night, but this one's got all the amenities on it or something. So
yeah. Amazing. This is so exciting. I've seen the videos like, oh my gosh, it's such an exciting project. It's going to be absolutely over the top, like nothing that's out there anywhere,
I
honestly. It's
love it.
so exciting.
We just
And
want
you
to, we
went
want to
from you
compete.
went from nothing like two
Yeah.
years ago and being like, what? How do you do
This is
that?
a thing. Yeah.
It's
You said it. Just
amazing.
take just one step at a time. And I literally have
Yeah.
that. I have that one step at a time put on my whiteboard right here beside me. Is if you look down the road too much, if you are constantly looking down the road at what's going on, you're not going to take the that
Mhm.
next step to get there because you're so worried about what's going to happen. It's like, well, what's in front of
Yeah.
you now? What's the issue now? Not the
Yeah.
get to that next issue after you finish this one and whatnot. So I think that mentality is what it kind of helps you put on those blinders and say, hey, all right, let's just get to work. I mean, you're
Right.
doing it, like just gotta find the way to the finish line.
Yeah, what can we do today, right?
Yeah,
Well, in closing, what is your closing statement? That could be it, honestly, one step at a time.
yeah.
But is
That's
there anything else you want to share?
no, I think that's a great closing. I mean, I encourage everyone to go for something. Like it just takes a
Yeah,
good plan. It takes a great idea is nothing without a plan and nothing without some people that believe in it. So you get enough people to believe in it and believe in your abilities to do something. And I think that comes from taking just steps. Like I people, whenever I started this idea, I have one of the investors that is a partner in the project now. He was like, "You are out of your mind. What is this? Like this is not going to work." And then now he's my head investor. So he was like, "Wow, okay, this is real. This is something that is viable." And that kind of a lot of just like weird looks across the table when I was explaining it, but he finally saw the
weird looks across.
picture.
This is when it comes down to believing in the person with the vision, though, too, because you're so committed to it, to doing everything, and then bringing all of the information to that. Again, yeah, it's just lovely. I think it's so exciting. You're really an inspiration, actually, because you came from not knowing anything,
Yeah.
and look what you've accomplished. It's a beautiful, beautiful story. I cannot wait to see.
I can't
what it's
either.
all going to look like. Just awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for taking so
Yeah,
much
thank you.
time
Thanks for having
today.
me.
It's been, yeah, really great. And I know you're inspiring so many people. And we'll have to kind of chop up this video and share a little. You shared so much
Yeah.
that's of so much value. And anyway, Joey, you're awesome.
Hey, I'm open to talk to
Thank you.
anybody. I'm
It
open to
was
talk to
delicious.
anybody about this. This is, I mean, I think collaborating with as many people as possible and telling your ideas can always bring up new ideas. So don't be
Yeah.
don't be worried about not sharing what you think, because like sharing your ideas is where, I don't know, that you can get inspired by the people around you.
Really, really true. And you have to be a light for everyone else. And when things are changing so rapidly and people a lot of times just don't know what's
Yeah.
happening in the market and they question and then they lean into the doubt, like you were saying, rather than being optimistic and looking towards what can we create.
Yeah.
So all of it is just fantastic. I could talk with you all day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You, I'll get back to work and you'll get back to work and we'll take the next step forward. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you,
Thank you for having
Joey.
me.